Okay, I wanted to do a little video. There was a topic in one of the forums I participate in. Somebody relatively new was asking about left-handed use on a M16 AR15. As far as my high-speed low drag credentials go, not that heavy, right? But, you know, I've been around. I don't have a set of the Wiley X glasses, but hey, check these out, right? Real deal. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit about left-handed use on an M16 type weapon. This is an airsoft gun, but it's perfectly good for this sort of training. If you're going to do this with a live gun, double, triple check, everything is empty. Because of the way we're going to be manipulating the bolt carrier on this, I suggest you get one magazine. Now this is the airsoft magazine, right? But I suggest you get one magazine out of your stuff, maybe a bad magazine, right? And just take the whole spring and follower back out of it. Take the whole spring and follower out of it, put it back together. Some guys will fill those with plaster or something like that. I don't know about that. Just have one magazine with no spring or follower on it so that it doesn't activate your bolt hold open when you're doing this type of practice. So as far as getting into left-handed manipulation on this, obviously most assault rifles are designed to be right-hand user-friendly because most soldiers and most militaries are right-handed. However, we start getting over to the assault rifle format as opposed to old bolt actions or maybe the M1 Garand. These are relatively easy to use left-handed. And in U.S. military, being left-handed does not mean that you automatically become you know, a right-hand rifle user, okay? So let's just say, for example, you've been issued an M16, you've gotten a hold of one, or something's happened, you're left-handed. Now, one of the things to realize about the evolution of the M16 rifles is there's more moving parts now than ever before. So in the latest M4A1 or M4 style, you've got stock manipulations, we've got stuff that might be happening up here, buttons and switches might be happening on the rail system. A lot of that stuff, it might be set up a certain way, it can be set up in reverse. I can't really address every possible button or rail switch or scopes you have to turn on before using them or something like that. But generally speaking, the whole stock control is ambidextrous, doesn't really matter. You would set it and forget it, preferably, on whatever position is comfortable for that time. The other basic rules, 3 firearm safety rules, is under most normal conditions: no round in the chamber, finger off the trigger, weapon pointed in a safe direction. Now, when I want to address these a little bit backwards right now. Weapon pointed in a safe direction, under patrol and combat circumstances, there's a lot of different ways you're going to have to deal with that where there's a bit of improvisation. Generally speaking, modern day, a lot of guys say, okay, we're going to point that muzzle usually downward. Old school, a lot of guys do want it upward. And depending on what organizations you're with or what the local rules are, what the local customs are, they may choose to actually point that weapon upward most of the time. A lot of Soviet pattern stuff, Russian trained people, they consider upward to be safe. This would also be called port arms. So a lot of people would consider this to be the safest way to point the weapon. The rule, as it's written in the NRA stuff, is pointed in a safe direction. So because of the current fashion with a lot of people, a lot of tactical stuff, a lot of the characters that you're going to see in the video games, is they're going to point it like this. I'm not doing this just to stay with the current fashion. I'm going to do it to illustrate a lot of the controls on this, but realize sometimes you are going to be like this because maybe downward isn't the safest direction to point in. So we've got basic controls are going to be the same on all M16 type weapons, all AR15 type weapons. We've got a safety selector lever here, we've got a trigger, we've got a bolt catch, we've got a bolt a T-handle for operating this. We've got a magazine release, and we've got a forward assist. This one on the airsoft gun is a little buggy, but it still works about the same way. Generally speaking, almost all of these controls are going to be reachable with the firing hand, one way or another. For left-hand users, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be manipulating that safety selector lever with our trigger finger for the most part. We can also use the next finger down, whatever you want to do to have positive control of the weapon at all times. It also means positive control of the controls, right? So the other thing I want to address is a lot of the sports shooters, a lot of the survivalists, a lot of guys have highly customized AR-15s. You have to realize we also have to standardize training according to what you may or may not be able to get a hold of in other countries, in other circumstances, all of that. So if I standardize training with somebody, we're going to be using relatively standardized rifles. We're not going to address everybody's possible custom configuration. So left-hand use on this, you're going to use your firing hand to control the weapon. It's same as you would as a right-handed person, but you're using, instead of using your thumb, which you could, okay, you can use your thumb on this, but to maintain positive control of it, we probably want our thumb around the other side, okay? We want it around there just in case something drops. We want our thumb around the other side, but you control it with this. As far as the charging handle goes, there's a little kicker thing here that if you just pull on that, you may or may not be able to get this thing to go back. You have to undo this little latch. One of the real advantages for a left-handed person on a normal unmodified charging handle, again, I'm doing a lot of these training methods with an unmodified configuration. At least the controls aren't modified on this. What we can do is we can still cock this by just using one side of the charging handle. We're going to pull back on this. Now the trick is not to torque it or overstress it over to one side. I've never seen a regular ordinary M16 break when you only pull one side of the cocking handle, okay? Never seen it happen. I have seen these things crack on some of the semi-automatic civilian, not so much a Colt AR-15, but some of the non-Colt off-brand ones. Maybe they were using soft metal, I don't know. I've also seen it never break on these airsoft guns. So we do left-hand use, our firing hand. Once we've inserted the magazine, we insert the magazine usually with the right hand. We make sure that it's seated and cock it, okay? Now another advantage I'm going to have as a left-handed user on this is you see me glancing down. Now, a lot of people want to say when you reload, keep your eyeball downrange, keep your eyeball on a threat and do that. They're right, okay? But it's also right to kind of eyeball in your chamber and make sure everything's kind of worked the way it should. Make sure that things are seated. And so for me personally, especially on the military rifle ranges, you don't want to be the guy who like had a fuck up in a jam in front of everybody else. So I'll cock it. I look down because I'm a left-handed user. I don't have to flip the weapon one way or the other way to see it. I'm more or less straight up and I can see what's going on in there. Now, if I need to unload the weapon, then the other thing I can do is I would pull this back and I would look in the chamber and I can eyeball right into that chamber, make sure everything's cool and the chamber's dry. Now, on these airsoft guns, you can't really do that. You can actually have a round that's in the chamber of the airsoft gun, and then when you go to load a magazine, which is loaded with the gas, it'll fire. And you have no way of actually getting that little pellet out of the chamber. So there is a little difference with the airsoft that you have to have actually additional muzzle awareness safety compared to a regular firearm, because there's no way to get that thing out of the chamber once it's in there. In fact, it's also possible to load more than one in the chamber. Little goofy thing on there. But left-handed user, this is how you're going to manipulate this. Now, your reloading process for a right-hand user is usually going to involve that you can use your trigger finger to manipulate the magazine release, okay? Again, we're going to assume that maybe you haven't been able to customize this and install an ambidextrous control. The other thing is, we know 100% certain after 40 years of these things being in service that the standard factory magazine catch release system, it works, okay? It never got modified over the last 40 years. They do work. Some of the ambidextrous ones, that's not always been the case. So, you know, right-hand user is going to do this to reload. Left-hand user, that does work a bit differently, okay? One, there's no way that you're going to be able to get your firing hand over to that magazine release. This has to be done with a non-firing hand for a left-handed user. And our reload, a lot of times, is going to happen in 2 stages. The best way that I could say this thing's going to be left-hand friendly is for a magazine retention reload. That is where we're not just dropping the old magazine, tossing it, grabbing a new magazine and putting it in. where if you're doing super fast reloads and you're in competition with super fast reloads, the right-handed guy is going to be a little faster than this, the left-handed guy is going to be at a little bit of a disadvantage. But like I said, for cocking the weapon, for manipulating some of the other controls, the left-handed guy has some advantages we can make up for that. So for a reloading process, generally what we're going to do is we're going to do magazine retention. This is a magazine retention friendly method. We use the thumb to get that magazine out. We get a positive grip on it. When we pull it out, we'll put it in either a pocket or a dump pouch. We grab a replacement magazine. Feel by feel, you can feel the rib on the back of the magazine. Now, not all the PMag and aftermarket mags are going to be quite the same way, but you can feel the curvature. You should be able to feel that. Try to have your hand away from the top third of the magazine because that's the part that goes into magwell. So we're going to pull that out of our pouch. We're going to have a good positive grip on this thing without necessarily grabbing the upper third of it. We jam it in, and we're going to try and kind of, as we jam it in, we're kind of moving our grip over to the bottom half, okay? You're going to give a little smack on the bottom. Now, if you smack it hard enough on the bottom and your bolt's been held back, that may get the bolt to go forward. And as a left-handed user, a lot of times I'm going to glance down in that chamber and, you know, if I saw that thing go in there, I'm good to go, right? If not, then here's where the left-hand guy can start making up a little time. A right-hand guy slaps that magazine in, brings the other hand, goes like that, and he's back in the game, right? He's actually not really sure if that round chambered. If he tips a weapon like this, the problem is, if there was something goofy going on and he's had a double feed or something like that, gravity is pulling that little problem down into his weapon, okay? And so there's a lot of guys that want to say you want to have that ejection port down when you do a lot of stuff. So a right-handed guy might flip his weapon sideways, load like this, smack that, and he's good to go. It's a valid method. Left-hand use, we can reach all of this with these two fingers. See how this goes? Like if we're empty, what you got to do, and this is where it gets a little tricky, but this is usually kind of range safety type thing, where somebody says unload and clear your weapons, unload, clear, and lock. What you'll do is you'll remove the magazine. We may still have a round in the chamber, we don't know. There's 20 other guys on the firing line, so we don't want to be the odd guy out. At that point, you will hold down the little bottom part. That's the part that locks the bolt open. This is the part where you're reaching over the weapon. You hold that in, and when we do this, this thing's not going to spring forward on its own, right? So we have to push it forward manually, and our bolt's locked open. Now, the way it is on these airsoft guns, that kind of helps prevent it from firing, but there's a brass valve system in here that really makes it where you have no way of knowing if there's a round in the chamber of that or not. But we do know that with a bolt lock to the rear, we're capable of preventing this thing from firing. If you're at a regular shooting range, what they may ask you to do is set this thing down on the bench so that a range control officer or somebody like that can look in there and see that chamber. So you'd set that thing down like this. But the only other thing about left-hand controls to be aware of is, again, we're going to want to maintain positive control on the grip at all times. And most of the time, except of course when you're operating some of this stuff, you're going to maintain control here. You don't necessarily need both hands on a weapon at all times, but it helps. The thing is you would then want to close the ejection port sometimes like that. Now I'm going to go into patrol carry methods and how to do that as safely as what is practical under patrol combat security situations compared to range situations and some of the rationale for that.